Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining me as we spend the next hour together. As always, I'm hoping that you're safe and well and taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. You know what else matters? Your vote. I'm encouraging you to get out and vote. No matter who you vote for, just be sure to exercise your right to vote. And speaking of voting, a lot of people are doing it in record numbers right now. They're getting out with their early voting. Take a look at this image from New Orleans. Here we see a mother and her young son, and this image has gone viral now. The mother clearly showing how she is concerned about her family and her neighbors during the COVID-19 pandemic, placing her child and herself into a plastic bubble while standing in line to vote. She is also concerned about the state of race relations in America since the death of George Floyd, as she wears a mask that reads, "I can't breathe." Now, clearly, she epitomizes the sentiment of millions of Black women who are concerned about the impact of COVID-19, which is causing disproportionate high death rates and job losses among Black Americans. Plus, the concerns they have about making a more perfect union in America with regard to race. So, my friends, like her, we all should get out and vote. And those are my opening observations. Thanks for joining us today. And joining me now, my first guest of the hour is Dr. Benjamin Chavis. He's the president and CEO of the National Newspapers Publishers Association, the Black Press USA. It's always good to have him on because of his insights into what's happening politically, culturally, religiously. You touch all the bases there. And the Black Press is actually reporting on a lot of things, just like the Black News Channel. And I'm glad we have a partnership together, Ben. But tell us, if you will, since the elephant in the room right now is that we're just a week away from the election, 8 days away to be a matter of fact. But last night on CBS 60 Minutes, a lot of people were watching the president and the vice president, as well as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And of course, the president walked off the set during the interview with Leslie Stahl. What did you think about that?
Well, I thought it was very revealing, exposing, but also in a sense, I don't think any of us, millions of people who watched 60 Minutes, were totally surprised. Leslie Stahl is an excellent journalist. When I was the head of the NAACP, she interviewed me, and that's her style. She doesn't offer soft questions or lollyball questions or volleyball questions. She's a journalist, and I think for the president of the United States not to expect the real questions, the so-called "quote unquote" tough questions, but they're really just questions about reality. And I thought that this is the difference between real news and reality show news. And I think that he got upset, and I think that I don't think it helped his campaign at all to see the president of the United States walk away from a questioning from a distinguished journalist on live television. And so, it was pre-recorded, but I'm saying on 60 Minutes, which is the longest running news program in American television, 60 Minutes. One of the longest ones. I think Meet the Press is the longest one. But the thing is, I come from the Black press, and this is our 193rd year of the Black press of America since Freedom's Journal in 1827. And the reason why I use that context in giving you an answer, Kelly, is that, look, the media has to do its job. Freedom of the press is really nonpartisan. It is objective. And we have to ask the questions that can determine people's life or death, can determine people's joy or sorrow, can determine people's poverty or wealth. And that's the purpose of the media. That's the purpose of the press. And so anybody who is president or who wants to be president has to expect that they're going to get the real questions that represent the real conditions that affect millions of people's lives. We're in the middle of a pandemic. People are dying. Now it's over 225, 226,000 who have lost their lives. And it's a tragedy. I think it's a question of whoever wants to be the next president having regard for people or disregard. What we saw last night was disregard.
Yeah, and then we also saw, an interview with Joe Biden in that same 60 Minutes program. And Joe Biden was asked some very tough questions by Nora O'Donnell. And, the point of the matter is that the president stated that he's watched every interview done on Joe Biden, and he claimed that they were soft questions, but yet it was very tough,
It was very tough,
but
and
done in a civil.
significantly, Joe Biden didn't walk off the set. Kamala Harris didn't walk off the set, and I can say Vice President Pence didn't walk off the set. Only one person of the four walked off the set, and that was the President of the United States.
We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the fact that the voter turnout is huge right now. More than 50 million people have voted so far. I think the total right now is 57 million, is probably skyrocketing beyond that in early voting. And early voting has started in many of the states throughout the country. I'm talking to Dr. Benjamin Chavis. We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. Talking to Dr. Benjamin Chavis. He's the president, CEO of the National Newspapers Publishers Association and the Black Press USA. We're talking all things with regards to politics and the election. It's looming large. It's just around the corner for many of us, and many people have started early voting. You were talking about the fact that Black voters, your newspapers or the newspapers in the Black Press USA, are reporting that there's been record turnouts of Black Americans. As you know, you and I, when we launched this program back in February, we were talking about the fact that the Black woman would be the most pivotal vote in this election. Is that ringing true? And is it time for brothers, Black men, to step up to the plate and vote in large numbers as well?
Well, it's a good news to report. No question about it. Black women were the key pivotal turnout of vote in 2018. And in 2020, Black women are also leading the way. But I got some good news, at least from the reports from my publishers. Black men are now joining Black women, going to the polls in record numbers. So I think that the call that was issued months ago on this program, a lot of Black men are heeding. And I'm very pleased that whole Black families are going to the poll who are eligible to vote. And I think that is good. Now, certainly the national polls still show that there's some reluctance of Black men considering to vote. And I would just like to use this opportunity on the Black News Channel, on the Kelly Wright Show, to say to everybody, Black men, Black women, Black millennials, if you're eligible to vote, this is the most consequential vote of our lifetimes. Let's pay our tribute to Rosa Parks, to Harriet Tubman, to Martin Luther King Jr., to Medgar Evers, to all a lot of brothers and sisters who gave their lives so that we could have not only the right to vote, but the responsibility to vote.
You mentioned Harriet Tubman, and this joggled in my mind that this is the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. And there were women like Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth who helped women get to that place of being given the right to vote. Yet white women distanced themselves from Black women, and it took a while for Black women to get to that level of being able to
Right.
vote equally and having equal justice under the law. How pivotal this is! What an election year! That in 100th year, that Black women are still looming large, being pioneers and trailblazers, and Black men now getting on board. Look, the bottom line is people must vote. And we can't stress that enough on this program or on this channel.
Absolutely. And I think Black women, I think it's providential. I use that religious term. It's providential that a Black woman is the vice presidential candidate on the Democratic
Absolutely.
ticket. That is historic. And if there was any fulfillment of the 100-year anniversary of suffrage for all women, it is to elect the first woman as vice president of the United States, the first Black woman as president of the United States. That's very fitting.
Now, to be fair, there are people out there within the Black community, since we're not monolithic in terms of how we vote. There are some who are supporting President Trump and actually Vice President Pence, and they will vote. And everybody has the right to vote who they want to vote for. But the bottom line is turnout is very important on all sides of the spectrum, and Black people must vote.
Absolutely. Across, again, it's the most consequential election, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, or whether you're independent. If you're Black, if you're white, if you're Latino, if you're Asian, if you're Native American, uh, however you affirm who you are, we all have a responsibility to vote.
And have your newspapers or have your publishers discovered any signs of voter suppression?
Oh,
And what have you done
absolutely.
about it?
The antidote to voter suppression is massive voter turnout.
Good point.
Yes, and voter suppression is not just in the Deep South. Voter suppression is all over the country. And again, I'm so grateful and thankful to be able to witness that voter suppression has boomeranged, I think backfired,
Mhm.
because now people are standing in lines. People are saying, I don't care if I have to stand in line 8 hours, 6 hours, whatever it takes. You're not going to deny my right to vote. You're not going to deny my responsibility to vote. So there's a sense of uh, uh, defiance to voter suppression. And I think even a lot of Black men now decided that they're not going to sit back and just watch sisters go to the polls alone.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dr. Benjamin Chavis, before I let you go, you put it very clearly that empathy is on the ballot, and you've got to elect a president who disregards or regards, and that's for the people to decide. But you saw
Absolutely.
something about Joe Biden that you were telling me about him showing empathy.
In Parkland, Florida, the former Vice President Biden, was showing complete empathy to some of the victims of the people who had been killed at the Parkland shooting. And his hug of one of the sons of the victims is now going viral. And that, I think, is even though that happened some time ago in Parkland, Florida, the fact that one candidate is exhibiting empathy and another candidate is exhibiting the absence of empathy in terms of the coronavirus, in terms of deadly shootings, in terms of gun control, in terms of white supremacy, in terms of police brutality, in terms of housing. I mean, the list is long. People are being evicted. Hundreds of thousands of people being evicted because of the COVID-19. They don't have income, but now they're going to be evicted. And now the Congress has not passed the stimulus. We are going down to the deadline 8 days before the election. And yet the Senate, Mitch McConnell, is also not showing any empathy. All they want to do is put another person on the Supreme Court so they can stack the court. So it's interesting. They keep asking Biden, are you going to stack the courts? But they are stacking the courts.
Yeah.
The courts have been stacked as we speak. So I think that, yes, empathy is on the ballot. And what is going viral today shows Vice President having extreme, passionate empathy for the victims of gun violence.
Dr. Benjamin Chavis, thank you very much. Of course, it's in the hands of the voters. Voters must decide what's going to happen for the future of America. And I appreciate all the work that the Black Press and the NNPA is doing. Thank you, sir. And thank you.
Thank you. We'll continue to stay in touch.
Absolutely. Back with more after this. We're going to talk about the coronavirus with a member of Johns Hopkins University Medical Center. That's next. Welcome back to the program. So we're watching all things that take place with the coronavirus. You would think that we would flatten the curve by now, but we have not. In fact, it's getting worse. And Johns Hopkins University has been on top of it, letting us all know globally how this virus is impacting the world. And here in the United States, we're now more than 8 million cases. Joining me from Johns Hopkins University, he's a lung and pulmonary specialist on the front lines of COVID-19. Dr. Panagis Galiatos joins us, better known as Dr. G. Dr. G, thanks for joining me again. The bottom line is we have no good news to report on this right now, as far as I can see. So as often is the case for me to make a house call with my doctor here, I would say, Doc, give me the bad news first. What's the bad news?
So let me tell you the bad news with some good news, right? So I mean, is the virus is about to be a year old. And so the pace of science is moving at a pace that I've never seen in my 10-year career of being a physician. And I love that. I love, the camaraderie, the collegiality. A lot of silver linings have come out of this virus, and we need silver linings. We can't let the mortality and the morbidity of this pandemic be for naught. So we're seeing great leaps, great breakthroughs and so forth in science. And those is we really do have a better hold and understanding of the biology of this virus. We understand to some extent how it's transmitted, how it passes on from one individual to another. We have a good sense of who's likely to develop more severe COVID-19, right? I say this because we have the knowledge, right? That's the good news I want to share.
Mm-hmm.
The bad news is we are still getting mixed messaging in a public health manner of what to do to mitigate the spread of this. I oftentimes, every time I go into the community and talk about it, I constantly get asked, well, face masks don't work. So, well, they've worked since 1897 to make sure you don't get wound infections in the operating room, right? When surgeons wear them. I wear them in order to protect so many of my patients so I don't spread germs. We know they work. There is a 100+ year history of understanding that face masks are crucial to maintaining sterility in the medical field. And in that case, we know the way they work is stopping these aerosols, these water droplets that come out every time you talk or breathe out. And in those water droplets, you can contain thousands upon thousands of viruses in there, especially SARS-CoV-2. So we have the proven science that these face masks work. Have they been proven in this current pandemic? Likely not, just because it's happening in real time. But we know there is strong plausibility that it will work. We know physical distancing works, right? I always make the point, when we heard about this virus while we're in the United States around January and February, where was it? It was in South Korea, it was in China, it was in Italy, it was in Iran. It was physically very distant. So we know physical distancing works, right? If you're far apart from someone. With that said, as we phase in, if we don't phase in responsibly, we can overcome all that knowledge of how face masks and physical distancing really works in real time. So the bad news is we are seeing, yes, an uptake of cases. We're seeing it in real time. My concern of that is what resources do we have, machinery to medications to man and woman power, right? I think that's one part that often gets lost in this conversation is, do we have enough medicines? Do we have enough machines to care for patients? But also, do we have enough staff? Back in the spring, my 10-year career, I've never seen my nursing colleagues and my physician colleagues literally question, is this the right thing to be doing? In a sense of continuing working in this healthcare arena where it feels like, we're not getting proper resources, people aren't listening to us. It just feels like, trying to swim upstream. And so we have the knowledge, the silver lining that I discussed, Mr. Wright, we have a lot of good information, but the bad news is it doesn't seem to be making the impact that we would be hoping it would be making by this point in time.
Let's hope so. I'm talking to Dr. Panagis Galiatos. We're going to take a slight break. When we come back, we'll talk more specifically about this virus's impact disproportionately on the Black and Brown communities. We've talked about it before. It's always worth mentioning again, so everyone will learn to mask up and COVID down in those communities as well. Back with more after this. And welcome back to the program. We're talking about the coronavirus and its impact on our country. And it is deadly. It's devastating. Dr. Panagis Galiatos of Johns Hopkins University is with me now. We've talked about this before, and we've talked about it a lot on this program with other doctors. But from Johns Hopkins University's perspective, how has the science revealed the disproportionality and the impact, the negative impact on Black and Brown Americans?
The health disparities that we're seeing for COVID-19 parallel prior health issues that we've seen, for instance, around conditions like sepsis or pneumonias, where we've seen them always disproportionately impact minority populations, African-American populations, as well as Hispanic Latino populations. And then what I'm hoping is we saw so much action being driven to kind of put these kind of headlines front and center, not just in medical journals, but in media outlets, right? I remember reading an article from the local Richmond newspaper around May that said all the deaths of that city were of African-American race. And so what we need now is a firm commitment to not just mitigate healthcare disparities, but to end them. And so when you ask, what are we doing for the disproportionate, unethical impact on these populations? We are seeing in real time hospitals and academic medical centers begin to understand how to mitigate. Challenge I will say though, Mr. Wright, is that a lot of the conversations, even though healthcare, like a hospital, owns 100% accountability over the health outcomes of an individual, we own almost no oversight of certain proximal variables that determine an individual's health outcomes, right? How is a neighborhood shaped? The contextual level relationship of, indoor housing pollution, right? Of how the indoor quality of a house, the ability for transportation to be accessible so individuals can get from point A to point B without any issues, right? In Baltimore, sometimes patients going 2 miles, it takes them 2 hours. That's unethical. Education system, right? Do we have the proper infrastructure to make sure there's equitable educational outcomes? The reason why I'm emphasizing these points, and there's countless others, is because we know these non-biological factors upstream end up resulting in a clustering of other pandemics that have been seen in the African American and Hispanic Latino communities. High rates of diabetes, high blood pressure, mental health consequences. You add an infection, you're going to get disproportionate deaths and morbidity from it. And that's what we saw with this pandemic. So what I'm hoping, Mr. Wright, yes, hospitals are starting to stand up and say, hey, healthcare disparities, we need to make them a thing of the past. But what I'm hoping we see is a commitment from these other key stakeholders that impact health. Yeah, it's downstream, but they need to feel responsible for it in the upstream. So could you imagine this a great outcome from this pandemic being that school systems, housing systems, transportation systems, job systems all got together to work with hospitals to say, how do we promote health? How do we prevent disease? Everyone should feel accountable for it, not just the hospital, which at the end of the day, all we can implement is medical initiatives, not a holistic health initiative.
In addition to saying that, what's your message to people who are watching this program saying, get off your duff and go out and be a leader and help lead your city to help these communities?
I say this, Mr. Wright, I'm a son of immigrants. My parents chose to come to America, not because they saw it as an ethnicity, but as an idea, right? This country gets built on people doing amazing things. And if we have unequitable findings that prevent people from being their best, we have to step up and mitigate and resolve these. So from my standpoint, if we're using COVID-19 as a barometer to say things are not right in this country, I'm hoping it is the catalyst we need to put the resources where they need to be to help out everyone. Everyone, I say this because how amazing would this country end up being if it could be not just a leader of democracy, that's fine, but a leader of equity to me means you are getting the most out of your population every day.
Sir, I thank you so much, and I thank you for being a part of Johns Hopkins and what they're doing to keep us all abreast of what's going on and understanding the science, but also understanding from your perspective that it goes beyond the science and also gets into the care and welfare of the entire community. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Wright, it's an honor to be on your program again. Thank you, sir.
Thanks again, sir. He's better known as Dr. G, but Dr. Panagis Galiatos on the program tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. So we've been following the developments in Nigeria, and there's a lot going on over there. No peace at all for the young people who are striving so hard to let their freedom be recognized. They represent some 40% of Nigerians. So I thought we'd bring back Juliana Onjuku again. She is from Nigeria, and she's a part of the group of global citizens who are deeply concerned about the brutalization of Black people here in the US, as well as abroad in Africa. She's based out of Atlanta now. I should point out, Juliana, thank you for being on the program again, that you're the chair of the Economic Justice Committee for the Georgia National Organization for Women and the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Workforce Strong. That's something we can talk about in later shows because you're doing a lot of great work. You're in the vanguard of doing that. You're also a former member of the United Nations Peace and Security Division, and now known as UN for Women, or UN Women, I should point out. And then you're a graduate of Georgetown, Harvard as well, and you've worked formerly as an Indiana Supreme Court Fellow. Tell me all about what's happening in your native country of Nigeria and why here in America we must be concerned to keep our eyes on the situation.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for having me back on the show. It's really disheartening to keep having to come back with the travesties that are continuing on in our country. It's important for everybody to really keep their eye on what's happening in Nigeria because there is a systematic problem that's going on, and it is connected to national security. As I believe the last time, I believe Nigeria is like the 5th supplier of oil to the United States and stands as a part of its national security plan for many other nations. But outside of that, the systematic breakdown of what's happening in Nigeria is key. It's important for that nation to be stabilized as all African nations because we live in a global society. As I was talking to you early, Kelly, in my opinion is not the opinion, there's sort of a strategy that leads to the continuation of an oppression of people. You know, it starts off with the disruption. And we've clearly seen moving from peaceful rallies, there have been disruptions where the focus has been put on bad agents, those that are choosing to use this opportunity to rob, steal, and pillage, and to make that a focus so that the peaceful rally and the peaceful request for the betterment of Nigeria is ultimately disrupted and focused to folks that they're saying that are bad actors. Shortly after the disruption, we're sort of heading right into the divide. We're now hearing videos and listening to people where they are now calling for tribal divides at the time when they should be calling about unifying for the greater good of the country. As the divide continues to spread, which we're hoping will stop, we know that that divide is going to lead to the distortion of information. No longer will this be about the brutality. No longer will it be about the nationalizing of Nigeria under the tenets that actually have everybody having the capacity to thrive. No longer will it be focused on the fact that these young adults are heading into the workforce age, the time where Nigeria's economy can see great benefits from getting a workforce that can be innovative and contributing to the society. The message will soon be disrupted and it will become a tribal warfare they're hoping that the world will turn away from, as they've done in many other tribal warfares that have led to the genocide of people. And shortly after that, the mission will be destroyed. Underneath the banner of divided tribes, you know, under the cover of COVID, with the message of brutality being treated with escalated brutality, we're going to see that the message will be ultimately destroyed. And then there'll be a systematic way of something systematically put into play to punish the actors who dare to go against the status quo.
You know, that's quite sobering when you think about that, because that means it impacts America as well. The atrocities that we're seeing there, the brutal force against these young people, the torture that we're seeing. I mean, the video is just stunning and heartbreaking, and you look at it in disbelief that this is going on. And so what can the United States do about this, and why should the United States be concerned about this, since it can cause a destabilization in Nigeria and other African nations?
We continue to ask, I continue to ask the United States to think about its interests. Let's just be plain. Nigeria provides interest and resources for many large-scale nations. beyond our oil, beyond our gold, beyond our ore, beyond our human resources, as many Nigerians are great contributors and great citizens here in the United States, tax-paying individuals that are here, all of the things that we provide are interconnected. The interest of stabilizing that country allows us to kind of reimagine what we can be in a global society, what we can do with trade, what we can do with oil, what we can do with development, what we can do with workforce, individuals in a global society, because we all need each other. There is no real separation like we see it before, because anything happening in one place can easily be happening here. COVID is a global disease. It did not isolate where it started. It's affected the whole world. That's how globalized we are. It's not the time to ignore and let those steps go down to some distorted view of tribal conflict, when this is a cry out from young people for nation building. But we need help. We need assistance. We need policymakers. Those youth need people to support. They need people to arrive to provide enough stabilized time so that what they're talking about can be effectively reviewed. We need training, better governance. And we don't need those things just for the betterment of Nigeria alone. It's the betterment of Africa, as we're starting to see other African nations are springing up in their own individualized warfares, all crying out for the same thing. We want a better country so we can be better global citizens and continue to contribute into the global society for the betterment of everybody.
Yeah, and thank you for that. To your point, we're seeing some uprisings or possible, not uprising, but some possible force being applied in places like Tanzania. These are all important factors that African Americans and all Americans should be concerned with. I'm talking to Juliana and Njoku. We'll be back after the break to talk more about how there are some parallels and similarities between what we're seeing in Africa and what we're seeing here on the streets of America. That's next. You know, you remind me of what former congressional member John Lewis, the great civil rights activist, who once stated, "If you see trouble, if you see something wrong, say something, do something, stir up some good trouble." Do you think the Black Lives Matter movement was distorted and divided by people within the administration, the Trump administration, and calling out Antifa and saying that peaceful protesters were actually rioters and looters? Do you think that's part of what you're seeing in terms of the parallels between here and Nigeria?
Yes, there are a lot of things that I see. I think that they played a part of it. See, government is there to speak to all aspects of the people. It's not supposed to take a side, and it's not supposed to call out one group without evidence that that group was even an actor. Because actually, they've had more evidence to the contrary, that other agents, other disruptors went in to paint on the walls BLM while they were looting. There have been videotapes of non-African American individuals running in and out of stores that had no connection to the movement whatsoever. But that distortion criminalizes, once again, the people that were trying to call for change and growth and development, similar to Nigeria, by ultimately criminalizing or increasing the brutality of those that are crying out about brutality, changes and distorts the message. And makes people subconsciously think about, well, should I really care about that? If they're just looters, why should I care? Why do they really matter? Why should I give my dollars? Why should I be concerned about that if they are ultimately the kind of people we don't want to live around? Distorting the message takes it away, because a lot of people who are in government power don't like any form of correction. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when people who are supposed to be the centerpiece of your governance are talking about the fact that we're calling for improvement, this can't go on, we're calling for change, it's not always just levying in some sort of whip against, but a demand for greater and better governance. And this is what's happening parallel, I believe, in Nigeria. We've been demanding for better governments for decades. And the young people that are there have been pushed to the limit. I just fear that their voices are going to be drowned out in the distortion, which will ultimately destroy their movement.
We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. So I'm having a conversation with Juliana Njoku. She is an incredible, talented, gifted woman who's doing a lot of great things in terms of economic development, workforce development. And she has a lot of great understanding, if you will, of what's happening in Nigeria. But one of the other things that you've talked about with me, Juliana, is the fact that African Americans can actually partner in business, not just here in the United States, but also develop foreign businesses in Africa. And even though Nigeria is right now going through a crisis, there is still opportunity to help people there and to build upon a better future for them. How do you address that, and how do you inspire African American business owners to say, wait a minute, don't think that all of your business has to be done here in America?
Absolutely. Now, I know I've given, the grim reaper of breakdowns, but I do want to end with a very positive note. Africa is a wealth. The continent is a wealth of resources, not just human resources, but agricultural, mineral resources that can advance any group in any capacity, and provide African Americans one of the strongholds that they can have. I think one of the last things that Martin Luther King was fighting for was civil rights. Economic standpoints, where we're now looking at more African American groups looking at banking, looking at pooling their resources, looking at buying from individuals, looking at industry. And they shouldn't look too far away from Africa. Africa has a direct pipeline of great resources. And that's another reason why I hope that African Americans will pay attention to what's happening in Nigeria's stabilization. Its stabilization provides an opportunity for African Americans to find another pipeline of resources that can help establish industries within this country that can put them at the seat of the table for the conversations they've been waiting to have literally for maybe centuries. Mm-hmm. This conversation is about us being able to be awarded for our contributions to the society, for us to be able to innovate, for us to be able to grow, for us to be able to own, and for us to be able to expand. Africa provides a direct pipeline, and I hope that people won't be afraid of the messaging of the unstabilization of society right now, because there is another opportunity. There are great African American minds, policymakers, lawyers that can contribute in the nation building of Africa, or nation building of Nigeria. And in that, provide an avenue for trade and commerce that would rebuild our trust in each other and allow us to be able to have that open trade conversation where we can have direct sources into the wealth of that nation and that continent that can provide a benefit for both of us. Africa needs support, education, a stronghold of individuals, and a resource for trade for our youth to be able to create jobs on their own. African Americans need industry, a stronghold of economic justice and economic rights to address even their own problems without having to wait for any other individual to come and answer the issues that we know exist within our community. The marrying of the two, or the meeting of the mind of the two, provides an opportunity. So I hope that as people are watching Africa, they're not watching Africa in the light or with the glasses of the fears, but watch Africa in the light of the opportunities to connect that bridge and to strengthen both of our communities here and abroad to be able to do more for each other so that we can have more on this global stage. And I'm equally excited about that. I'm starting to see a lot of African Americans really consider what Africa has to offer. I'm hoping that that momentum continues on. As there are more Black banks, more Black cities, more calls to buy Black farmers, do not just keep yourself domestically. Look at what you could do with your brothers overseas, here in the Caribbean, and so on, and find yourself on the world stage a stronghold to be able to address your issues as they continue to come up.
Juliana, I appreciate you for saying that. I mean, I've seen it with my own two eyes, having traveled abroad to Africa and being told by African presidents that we need African Americans to be involved in our future, our present and our future, and redeem us of our past. I just think there's a great opportunity, and I'm glad that you were here to talk about this. And you are welcome to this platform anytime. Of course, you know that. But I appreciate your insights in terms of what's going on politically and what's happening with the breakdown of Nigeria right now. But my prayer, my hope is that it can be lifted up. But I think we here in America, Black Americans, have responsibility, and we can help change, effectuate a positive change. And I think you just brought that to the forefront. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for continuing to push this message, continue to provide support for the communities that we have here. Once again, thank you so much for all your listeners. Please continue to help us to pray for our home country here in the United States, as well as in Nigeria, my home country, and all the other places in the world that are seeking this opportunity in 2020 to get the change that they've always wanted. We have a real opportunity. It's not all gloom and doom. We have a real opportunity to come out of 2020 with a brand new decade where we actually have the nation building as the communities and the nations that we truly want. But it requires us to work together. Please don't fall for the divide.
Thank you so much, Juliana and Joko. Thank you. We'll be back with my final word after this. And welcome back. I'd like to thank all of the guests who appeared on tonight's program. My final word is, as we go through life, we are sometimes exposed to a lot of doom and gloom, but it's important to remain optimistic and hopeful that things can change when we consider the opportunities to plant and bloom. So keep sowing seeds of greatness. Never let go of your dream and watch it come true. Hopefully we've been ignited, and united to keep spreading knowledge, love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
Mankind won't survive if our hearts beat aside a hateful rhythm. You see, love isn't bought, but comes with a price of forgiveness, and we all bleed the same. Yeah. If you don't feel it now, just wait. It's coming on, the love train. Just give it time, give it time. Get on board. That means you, and you and you. Get on board.
All creeds and colors,
brothers,
all sisters and brothers,
and sisters,
on the love train.
Get on board the love train. Everyone's invited.